Let me turn down my sound. I I started doing the drawing again in Instagram about a half hour ago, and so I have a little some of the landmarks in already, and I see that I have a few people here already joining me. That's great. And I'm gonna start going right into the painting if I can. You can see this is a photo that I got off of Sketchy. This is Jaime. She was chosen second a couple weeks ago um, by a very narrow margin. The first place painting I did last week that was of Kristen Aubin, and if some of you were there watching, that one went pretty well, I think. I don't have all the paints that I need laid out, so when I lay out some of those paints while a few more people come in and join us. But so my palette is a high key palette. I choose my colors based on the hues around the color wheel and the highest tinting strength I can get out of each color. Just actually listened to a podcast that on the Savvy Painter podcast, and they interviewed uh, a few people from Gamblin Paints, including Robert Gamblin, and so it was interesting because I heard a few colors mentioned that I don't currently use that I may want to adopt. One of them was Perylene red, I think it was. Has a very high tinting strength. I have to see where that falls in the color wheel next to my quinacridone red, but it may be something that I decide to pick up and use. So I have, just so you know, if I can go through it quickly without my brain exploding, I have ivory black, sap green, phthalo emerald, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue. I have a dioxazine purple, extremely strong color, a alizarin permanent, which is a light fast version of alizarin crimson. Then I have the quinacridone red. I have a naphtha red, um, permanent orange, a Hansa yellow, and then I have titanium white. And that's my complete palette. I recently dropped off the palette my permanent green light because it was a color I could mix to match exactly using some other colors. So I decided I just didn't need one more color drawing on my palette as I worked. Please, if you're here, let me know how the sound quality is, if you can hear me okay, and that if you're first time here on this painting demo, you can also let me know. And also, I like to know where you're where you're watching from because I get the sense people watch from all over the world, and I have um, had viewers from Australia and Sweden. I'm here in the United States on the in Mid-Atlantic area. I think I need my quinacridone red. It's hiding here somewhere. I probably have it on my desk. Nope. Let me see if I can dig that out without wasting too much more time. If not, I have just a little bit there and I can pull it out later as I'm working, not to bore you guys too much. And let's see. It looks like there's four people with us. So I'm curious. I've pulled off burnt sienna off my palette a while ago because I just figured I could mix black with some fairly rich transparent colors like the quinacridone red and maybe throw in a hint of yellow in there and I can get something fairly close to a burnt sienna rather quickly. So this would be my match for burnt sienna. And so I can just go right in and start to put in some of the darks in her face. It's helpful having done the preliminary work the of the setup drawing to begin with, because then I can just with a pretty good level of confidence, know where I want things as I'm painting it in. I also want the flat of her nose. I want to get some of that color in so that I can just start indicating where those things are. And if I get some of these, if I'm pretty close to being accurate, then the painting will come along rather quickly. So that's what I hope to do, is sort of get the right colors and the right values in the right place, um, so that this painting starts to appear um, as soon as um, it can, sort of in a rapid fashion, so that you guys can see this develop quickly, not like watching paint dry. Anyway, you guys are kind of quiet. I'll get kind of quiet if you don't ask me any questions, or if you're just there. What did someone call it last week? I think Melania, who is in, I think, Alabama, told me that she was casting my video, which is a new term that I found out that meant watching YouTube on your TV. And oh, there's Melania saying hi. So she's probably casting as we speak, or as I speak. And just gonna get the lips in. So I almost using pure alizarin permanent for her upper lip. At least the far, when I want to say left side, the right side of her lips there is that darker color. She's catching a little bit of light, and it's almost grayish on the other side. So let's see if I just get a little bit of black and white. I'm not afraid of using black in my palette. I think that it helps me get to the color that I want really quickly, and does a fairly good job of helping me maintain the intensity of colors, to have that neutral dark, to be able to push a color darker rather quickly, as opposed to just having a dark complement somewhere, which will neutralize the colors faster. It's just a really lovely orange to reddish orange up here, so I'm going to see if I can get some of that indicated, and with a highlight, rather cool purplish highlight right there on her lip. Just going to throw those things in now, just as I work, so that they're kind of there waiting for me to adjust, but start to help create the visual cues that I'll need to make this a little more accurate as I go. It also helps me see where something's off. If you're putting more definite marks in, then you can, it sort of jumps out at you if something is a few millimeters off in one direction or another. And a pretty strong orange again. I'm going to have to refresh some of my colors on here, because I've let them get a little bit too dry on the palette, and the only way to really fix that is to put down some fresh color. Okay, I have a coworker, Angela. Sometimes she tunes in, but if she's here, she's being quiet. Sometimes she just watches with the sound off too, so as she's doing whatever her evening stuff at home. Okay, so I have right now a lot of these values very close together. I do need black right here to kind of pull that the form of her nose out, because in the photo it does almost go to black in some of these. Now, photos tend to exaggerate the contrast of form, and if you're a very skilled artist, you can pick out rather quickly what was painted from life and what's painted from a photo. Usually you can tell right away from the level of contrast, because if you're painting from life, you can see all those subtle color changes that are fairly close in value, um, that the photo tends to destroy. And so there is a difference between photo and life. If your intent is to make it look like life from a photo, you do have to do a fair amount of color correcting to get some of those subtle color changes to be more apparent before you start the painting process. I'm going to sneak a little bit, sort of in that direction, I'm going to sneak a little bit of purple into this shadow here, because I have a feeling that if I was painting it from life, that I would see a little bit more violet in the shadows. She has, I want to say it's a warm light on her face with a coolish shadow, but it's a very orangey light, creating kind of a purplish shadow structure. I have to be careful with the hairline here. It is rather soft and moves around a lot, but it is really close to her right eye, the eye on the left, but her anatomically her right eye. Um, so my typical tendency would be to move that hairline up, and then I would be in trouble as I started to work on the rest of the hair. And I am just going to get a big old honkin' brush. That's the technical term for it. And I'm going to mass in her hair rather quickly. But to do that, I need a whole lot more black. So I am going to do that. Okay, I could see my head moving on the screen there, so my picture isn't frozen. I have had problems recently in the last few videos where the screen would freeze in the middle, and I am not finding my colors very easily, so this is a trick that I've learned, is just dump them out all on the floor and then pick them up later. Sorry if my voice is dropping off there, because I went for a dive underneath my easel. Okay, I just put out a ton of black on my palette, and the trick here is I want to be able to put it down with, make sure that I don't contaminate that color too much. If I get a bunch of white in there, then I'm not going to be able to get the richness of those darks very easily. And I want to come in initially kind of thin so that it stays flat. It's when I start to get the thickness of that black too thick, then it's going to be catching reflections in all kinds of different directions, and then I'm going to have a problem seeing the values, or in the finished work also will those blacks will be, or those darks will be kind of uneven, because there'll be places where it's picking up a lot of reflected light. So just going to get that in. Oh, careful not to cover over where I have this rose drawn right here. That really important part here is where that black is coming against the face, because that's a real subtle change here, and for me to really see the value structure in the face, I really need to get that dark in just right along the edge of the face. Okay, and I think that rose comes in a little bit higher than I have it drawn. I can go back and remeasure just to make sure. And then the hair is coming off the shoulder here. If I draw a line from the corner of the mouth, you can see there's this kind of a geometric shape here. That's where I want hairline. And then you can see I really do have the rose starting in the wrong place. I'm going to come in with a completely different brush, so not to get this other color on my brush. So the rose is really coming in right around here. I can come in with a little bit stronger color on top of that. And that means that this hairline really comes over here. So right off the bat, I need another brush so I can go start putting in the background color. Here I have a brand new brush. It's a big flat number 8 flat, and that's going to allow me to put in some gray and want a little bit of, I think, purple in that background color. I'm going to mix a bunch of the colors on my palette that are already down, hoping to neutralize it a little bit, maybe throw in a little bit of yellow to neutralize that purple, and a touch of white, a little more purple. Okay, so I have a gray that sort of is undulating between yellow and purple, but the point is I want to correct that hairline there, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of black in the process here. And I can see I want to mimic a little bit what the photography's doing, which is having some lighter um, color. I'm just going to throw in some white there to get sort of some of that effect and get some of that other background. So here I'm just really trying to block in a fair amount of the hair in the background just to move this thing along rather quickly. So then I have a much stronger base to judge the values as I'm putting in some of the values in her face, which are really going to be the focal point of the painting. Her face is rather dark in relationship to her chest and shoulders, but this is where all the interest is. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to do with her chest, whether I'm going to keep it in that same value range or not, or either make it lighter or darker so that it isn't quite as prominent. So those are kind of design decisions that I have to make as I go along, and some of that is having to wait and see how the painting develops to get there and decide. There may be some rather loose brush strokes that I end up putting down, and I may decide I like those, and so to keep those, it may just work better keeping this area kind of open and loose. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Just a touch of pink in the photo up in this corner. I am just eating right through the white. I know I have half a tube of titanium white, which is a pretty safe amount, but I also have another tube. I think I've opened 2 tubes at the same time, so there's another tube of white floating around. Every time I order paint, usually I get my paints off of a Dick Blick website. I use all Gamblin artist colors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 colors altogether. And I have to sell a lot of paintings to pay for all that paint. No, but every time that I do order, and I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, I wait until they're on sale and buy a bunch. And I don't know if cheapskate's the right word. I'm economical. And but every time I order more white. White is by far my most utilized color. It's almost in every mixture that I put down. It's and this is something that actually see if I remember his name, the president, Peter, I think it was, of Gamblin Paint, had said that it would make sense because the world around us is mostly a 70% value, and the average of the paints are closer to a 40% value. So you need a lot of white on average to mimic the values that we're seeing in the world around us. And so that's as much white as all the other colors combined generally is what I tend to use. I'm just going to indicate where this flower is, and then I can go back to putting in my blacks. Okay, I'm about 20 minutes in and I almost have the painting done. Okay, good night. No, not good night. It will just at least help me visually kind of see the whole thing a little bit quicker if I can just block some of this information in. And I've been looking for ways to speed up the process a little bit, just because more often than not I'm doing these exercises live while people are watching. Sometimes I'll just record it live as a unlisted video, just so I have a recording of it. And it's an easy way to record without chewing through a lot of disk space or space on my camera. If I just shot this as a video on my camera, I would probably run out of memory space, not memory, storage space on my camera, probably in the first half hour of the painting. But the fact that I can record it live to myself as a private video allows me to just record for as long as I need to. And so this was I know if I bought a camcorder, I could record fairly long, but I wouldn't have very good quality video. I mean, good quality in terms of the resolution. And if I bought a DSLR camera, I would get probably much better resolution, but then you would have to stage the video so that you can download parts of it onto your computer or to some backup system. As you're recording, you have to stop and you have to do that every half hour, and a lot of these cameras don't have don't give you an indication of when you're running out of disk space, so you have to do your own little timer. Did a little bit of research into this until I figured out, I could just record the whole thing on my phone over on YouTube. And even if it wasn't a live broadcast, I could just treat it as if it was and record the whole thing. YouTube also gives you the option of recording a video into your phone and then pushing it live, but then you run into the same problem that it's recording to your phone, and then you run the risk of running out of disk space. I believe that's how it works. I haven't actually tested that to be 100% sure. It may be recording on a YouTube server, because there is an option where you can trim it, so that tends to make me think that if you're trimming it using YouTube's video editing tools, that it probably is then already on their server. This black, I have to come in where her neckline is just a little bit further. So this is starting to look a little bit like a Shepherd fairy poster with just very few colors here. If you're not familiar with his work, he's the one who did the Barack Obama Hope graphic image that was used for his campaign, and lots of campaign posters, or actually as a art piece too, that Shepherd Fairey used to, I guess, promote his own work. But he used just a few very strong colors, like a graphic poster from the 30s almost, to represent Barack Obama's face. And it's not too different than the colors that I have down now. I will come in with much subtler color changes, but it's not so bad that it has a strong graphic punch to begin with, and then I can come in with a little more accuracy and detail on top of that. There's a little bit of darker reddish purple on this side of the face, so I'm going to try to deepen that a little bit. I really do need to find my quinacridone red before I get too far into this, though. Knock out some of those lingering holes of white that are here so that I can see the values again a little bit better. So this says that there's, well, I guess on my phone it'll be more accurate. Oh, it's 12, it says 12 people watching. Okay, I was looking in the wrong place. And don't have a lot of room for my feet here because I did dump out all these paints on the floor. So if you hear me kicking stuff around, that's the paints on the ground. And I should be able to find the quinacridone red now that I've done that. So she has a little bit of highlight on her nose. It's not a pure white there, but it's lighter than around the surrounding. So sometimes a little tricky to nail values because our eyes and our brain compare it to the colors around it and make us think that something's lighter and dark or darker than it really is because of what it's next to. So with a little bit of practice and training, you get a lot better at judging those values, especially if you have uh, a lighter light to compare to or a darker dark. So if I'm looking at this spot on the nose, the bridge of the nose, and I think, oh my God, that looks almost white. But then if I look at the highlight here, and I can actually do a, let me see if I can do a dropper tool. Let me see. Just get a little technical here. When I bring up my info for Photoshop, let me drag this over. Okay, so I can get my dropper tool here, and if I go right over it, um, I can see my percentages here, and this will be, if it's white, like almost a pure white, those numbers will go almost to zero. So here in the reflection of the eye, there's a spot or two that are almost perfectly white. Can't quite see it, but if I blow her up. So right there is white, and maybe a spot here, right in there. Okay, so that's my whitest white. But look, if I compare it to here, this isn't looking so white anymore, is it? If I look at the two together. In fact, I can do an eyedrop right here. I can take my paintbrush, um, and I can paint. I thought I could paint. Oh, I don't have this image rasterized. Okay, there we go. And I can paint right next to it. You can see that that isn't very close to white. Anyway, so you get the idea. So I am going to make her back to 100% and get back to the painting. But just gives you a little bit of an idea of the actual values. And so I don't want to put white here on the bridge of the nose because that isn't the color there. I want to go lighter than what's around it, but I don't want to exaggerate it too much. And I want to get just the edge of her nose there. I'm just going to mimic, just with some quick washes, mimic the values in her cheek. Just going to paint really thinly there, just so I can go ahead and paint solid by mixing each of these colors, but if I just come in just with some light strokes, I can start to get a feel of those values. And she has some stronger reds on her upper eyelid here. Went a little bit too dark, but that's okay. And then I can come in with a little bit of smaller brush to get sort of the line of her lashes and her very upper lid there. But I'm just going to indicate them, try to get them close, so I start to see the form. Coming in with a little bit of purple right on top here. When I say purple, it's a very grayed down purple, because I just want to get the feeling of that light reflecting off the tops of her cheeks there. And then it's coming right up against those orange colors on the side of her cheek. If I get those values right, then all those forms will feel like they're turning. Have a lot of subtleties there that I need to get before it really does feel right. And you can see here, I have this purple here, way too light. I have her cheek maybe a little bit too dark, and what's happening is I have her cheek darker than I have the shadow. So of course that's not going to read correctly. So So I'm going to come in with some pure purple here first of all. Make that shadow area much darker. And it's going to need a little bit of black just to knock down the intensity of that purple. And then I almost have a pure black here, lower lip. Soften that edge a little bit. Get the right color on the brush first. And start playing with the lip shape to make sure that it is the right shape. And I think I just have to come down with the tip of the nose just a little bit with almost a pure naphtha red there. Okay, it looks like a very crude version of her face. I almost have it looking mask-like. But as I go through and restate those colors and values and start to make them a little more accurate, then and soften up some of those forms, then it will start to look a little bit better. See if I can soften up that edge. Okay, I have not looked at the screen, so let me just make sure. El Diario de Sarah Palin. I don't know what that means. Hi. The Diary of Sarah Palin. Oh, maybe that's the name. That's the name of the person's channel. Okay, interesting name. Just saying hi and smiling face. Okay. I thought that was the comment you were sending me. The Diary of Sarah Palin in Spanish. But that's just your channel name. I don't know why that's your channel name. It's an interesting channel name. I'll have to check out your channel later. Okay. So just to keep on going here in the vein that I'm going, I'm going to finish covering over the white. Let's get back to the right value at least. Get all the whites taken care of here. Pretty sure if I leave any whites, maybe in her chest a little bit, if I leave any of that open. But I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to get the rest of her roses in, just indicated a little bit. Now I'm just back to using one brush, so everything's getting contaminated here, but it's okay. If I'm half the painter that I say that I am, then I'll be able to fix those later, except for that one. I really need to get some more paint down on my palette too. So maybe I'll have an intermission at some point. I'll get some water. I'll put some more paints down. You guys get to go to the bathroom or something like that, because God knows you don't want to miss any of this. And okay, I think I'm getting creeped out a little bit from her eye that doesn't have any pupil in it, any iris in it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in, just so it doesn't look quite so creepy. I'm going to get the gray down the white of the eye there, get it closer to the right value. And then this side is going to, the other side, it looks like, if I'm looking at it, is mostly white with a touch of red in it here. And if I get the line of the eyelashes, then it won't look like she's all bug-eyed on us. And she has kind of an indication of her eyebrow up here. It's not very dark, but it's pretty high. You can see some of her forehead through her hair, so I'm just going to get a touch of that in here. And I can pull the shadow into her cheek a little bit further, and then harden the line of her cheek on this edge. it does look, if I look back and forth between what I painted and the photo, it looks like her head isn't quite turned in the right direction. So I am going to carve into her jawline a little bit on this side. And maybe give her a little bit more jaw on this side. But since I just put down that fresh wet black, it's a little bit hard to get that nice bright orange to read on top of it. So I just gave her a beard. Sorry about that, Jamie. Let's see. Really do need some new paint out here, because I don't know if you can see this. This naphtha red is just one big dried up chunk of paint. And that's not a good way to paint. It's counterproductive. So I am going to put out some more paint. Excuse me while I get my stiff body. Okay, found the quinacridone red. So, try to move some of this dried paint off first if I can find my palette knife. I really didn't do a whole lot of time in the setup here, unfortunately, and don't know where my palette knife is. So I do have my window scraper, which I use for a lot of things, to clean my palette and to scrape off old paint. So I'm just going to use that. Oh, there's my palette knife right under my nose. Okay, so I want some quinacridone red right here. I don't know if you guys can see my palette pretty well. I've tried to change my setup so that even though the painting itself is a little bit smaller, you can hopefully see pretty well my palette, so that as I'm working you can kind of see where I'm going with things. Here's my naphtha red to the rescue, and I need that. And the orange that I put down yesterday is still pretty fresh. Excuse me. Water break. Okay, now back to work. So I should have a good amount of the colors that I need to put down kind of in their pure-ish state to get back to where this needs to be. And the high point of that line of her cheek, her chin, is just about straight across from her base of her nose. So this is where I want to start. Oop, wrong color. Okay. It's easier just to remove it, I think. Okay, I meant to come out this side since I forgot that I had black on the brush. And then I want to come in a little bit closer here, trying to really get that line of her cheek in right, because that's going to help me see the shape of her whole head. And alizarin, I like using alizarin crimson or alizarin permanent, and sometimes with a touch of the purple, to get kind of the separation of lips, the color inside nostrils. Instead of going with a pure black, that red really helps kind of see the little bit of color that's coming from the naturally occurring redness from like the insides of noses, because of a little bit of the blood that's from the light passing through it. Just makes it feel a little bit more real. I'm gonna see if I can get the placement of that highlight on her nose a little bit better, so we can start to see it a little more accurately. And I'm just going to put that purplish highlight on the tip of her nose if I can get the right shape to begin with, because that will help us start to read those forms. And I have this nice red that's here in the corner of her upper cheek between her eye and her nose right here. So I guess this is where I'm going to start to paint from shape to shape and get a little bit more accurate with the colors and values, and that will help start to pull these forms out a little bit. Have a little bit of a darker red, or actually it's kind of a grayish purpley color right here, or under eyelid. And then a little bit of, need to make the white of that eye a little bit lighter. Sorry, my voice is dropping off a little bit there. As I start to get a little relaxed into the painting, I forget to talk into the mic and enunciate, talk a little bit louder. So when I've gone back and listened to these videos later, the volume is so quiet. And there's not a real good way of editing the value afterwards without destroying the live comments that are in the video. So I just leave it like that, too quiet. So I just have to keep on reminding myself to talk louder and louder. Okay, that eye isn't looking too bad. It's lacking a little detail, but sometimes that works. If you have gotten the idea of something without putting in all the details, then your brain, the viewer's brain, kind of does the rest. It's going to need to get lighter here. Okay. So take out some of this extra detail that's kind of lingering there. And there's this interesting little highlight that's around the edge of the nose there. It's really adds a lot of interest, so I want to make sure that I keep that in there. Let's get her upper lip light enough. So I haven't stopped to look where the light source is coming from, although I can tell you it's coming based on where the highlights are in the eye. It's coming from a little bit above and to the right of the painting. And so I want to keep that in mind as I start to put in my highlights, that I'm actually getting them in the right place in relationship to where the form is pointing. Okay, get that hotter, a little bit of a hotter red, lighter red on the top edge of her lip there. And then it falls off into shadow right there. And then the separation of her lips are pretty tight there, so I want to make sure that I get right down to it here. Again, her upper lip color, it's pretty gray on this one side. Don't want to go too red. And then it's kind of a purpley red on the other side, pretty dark. And then comes down pretty quickly. I think that's about right. But I'm not really getting the fullness of her lips yet. Just it's a matter of getting the values and colors right up here. It's almost a pure orangey red right up here. Just going to take a little bit of working back and forth to get the feeling of that color right. But getting it right, if I manage to get it right, then it will really feel kind of like real flesh especially the subtlety of the change right in here will be helpful. And then have almost a pure red going here, right there. Okay, and then I want the shadow to be in the right place, which is not quite yet there. Okay, starting to feel it, I'm starting to feel it, okay. And just get the purple, a little bit of a lighter purple there. And then this starts to fall off into shadow again, right on her lower jaw. So I'm going from darkest dark to a little bit lighter purple, and then it's starting to get dark again, but not as dark as that shadow underneath her lip. And then her chin line has a little bit of reflected light coming in right there. And then we have this black band that's around her neck. And that's right there. And then we have the color in her neck is sort of a light reddish color coming in here. And then the side of her neck here is following the shadow. That's kind of going to be kind of a purpley black there. And then her chest gets pretty light up against that. So getting all those little steps in color is going to help make it feel right. Something's kind of not quite right. The character of her nose, the feeling, it's like the nostrils and the placement and the size of things aren't quite there yet. But it'll get there soon. And her eye needs to be looking up a little bit more than I have it now. So I need to get under it with a little bit more white. And what's going to help is this, even if it's not quite in the right place, just getting a little bit of highlight there so I can get a better sense of the eye and the placement. And have that shadow coming in a little bit faster here. Okay. Great. Okay. Still a lot of adjustments to do in the face before that's going to feel right. That's what's going to take up a bulk of the time. I mean, I may spend a little bit of time noodling around in the roses, but I'd almost rather leave that till after I'm offline, because I could spend easily a couple hours just on those, and I think while I think it would be interesting, I think it's less interesting than seeing me work on the face. Trying to get that light orange there on the corner of her mouth, right here. That softer. I don't even know what to call this form. That's right at the corner of the mouth. It's almost the same on everybody. The corner of the mouth will be the sort of dark, drawn down edge, and then there'll be a circular. I don't know if circular is quite right, but just sort of a mound of flesh that kind of wraps around that. And then usually there's a little bit of shadow or darker color around that. It's a little soft. And so that's really helpful, getting those smaller, softer forms in the face in the right place. That really does help pull out a lot of the right feelings in the face, that sense of realism. But it's good to know what are common shapes that you would come across when painting any face, so that you know to then start to look for them. Okay, you need to keep this pretty, a little more, pump a little more red back into the lips in that spot. And then make sure I'm maintaining some of the grays that are in there, because that's really what will help those reds work. And I need, if I indicate a little bit of the center line here, right there. I don't want to go crazy with the creases in her lips. They're very subtle, and I don't want to have to try to paint them perfectly. I just want a good indication of just a little bit of visual cues to help us know what direction the planes are facing in the lips. Okay, I have Lisa Hawk from Sketchy, where she said she painted this as a watercolor on Sketchy. This was posted, I think, maybe a month or two ago. Jaime had posted a black and white version of it, and I did ask her if she had a color version. Then she did post this one, and so I did want to paint it. I put it up for a vote on my Instagram account, and it did. Everyone agreed with me that they wanted to see it. So, okay. So I need to really get the chest in here if I'm really going to start to judge the values that are in the face. And so I'm going to get my bigger brush, going to come in kind of thin at first, thin, white, orange, to get this. Just want a kind of indication at first. And then I can almost come in just a very thin wash here, because it is almost going to white. See, that only took a few seconds to do, and it's done. Okay, good night, everybody. Oh, I already used that joke. Okay, so I'm not going to do that again. So as I refine some of these shapes, then it will start to look right. But it does help me get a sort of a general indication. Used up my white completely in this whole process. So as I said, I could go through a whole tube of white in some paintings. And if you can see, if I compare her to the painting so far, that white has done a job to cool down the tones overall, which means that I'm not really dipping into the yellow enough to lighten things. So I have to be really aware of that if I'm going to get that kind of warmth overall that's in her flesh tones. I have to keep on picking up a little more hints of yellow as I work, a little bit of the orange and the red, and lay off the white, use the yellow more for lightening. Except for in the background here where I do want it to be cooler. Okay, let's see if I can soften up this a little bit. Remember, there's no rules on how any of this has to be done. The only rules are really what's going to make it work the best for you. And so I've had people comment like, oh, you use black there? I had a teacher that said never use black. Or, oh, I had a teacher that said you can't use that kind of brush, or you can't do it this way or that. And it's just like, well, it's your painting, it's your art. As long as you can get it to work, then you can make whatever rule you want. The rules are, I don't know if they're meant to be broken, but it's your work, it's your art. You make your own rules to get the rules to work for you. This all went a little bit too cool, so I'm going to try to get a little bit of yellow influence in some of these areas. And I need to, hate to get down to too small a brush. Got this nice little flat here. I don't know if you can see it. But this is good sort of chiseling kind of brush for me to get into little smaller areas to get some of these more subtle shapes, like get the proper shape of the tip of her nose so that it's reading correctly. Okay. This comes up here and then it goes much lighter. Try to add a little bit of yellow up here. And so I want to look at some of these general shapes, make sure I'm matching them. So if I look here, this light area, and then along the bridge of her nose, the side of her nose, and then coming down into her cheek, it's almost like a straight line here. And then there's this little triangle. It's the shape below her eyelid that it's a couple of forms that come together. The top of her cheek that comes around and the side of her nose, and then it forms that little triangle there. Almost a little purpley tip right at the bottom here. And then I have the highlight of the top of the cheek right here. That's helping us know that this form is turning right there. And then this sort of swoops down into the upper lip there. So if I can actually relate some of those shapes to what the form is actually doing, then that's going to help us see those forms as turning in space, not just one shape against another, but one volume against another. And then I have a little bit of high key red that's coming into the side of the cheek chin there, and that's also helping us know that the form is turning away from us right there and catching a little more light from a light source on the side. And I don't know what that light source is. Maybe it's an open window, or maybe it's a studio light or something from how it was shot. Then I want to get that sort of reddish purple highlight that's here on top of her chin. It comes pretty close to that shadow. And then I know from experience there's going to be a touch of green in this shadow coming off here. That's off next to a little bit stronger red in the cheek there. The chin, I should say. Red, yellow, orange, kind of darker orange. And then I want to make sure that I do get that higher key red that's coming down. Higher key, high tint. Okay. And got to work on the shape of the mouth a little bit because it's just not quite feeling like it's the right expression yet. I think it's because this comes up a little bit higher, and then there's this inside shape of her lip there, and then a little bit of a light orange on the very point of her upper lip. That's reading a little bit better. And then the shadow shape is coming down at an angle there. And then I'm missing still that lighter orange that's right here. something's in the wrong place though. I can feel it. I made her upper lip or something too long, so it's not quite reading right. So I need to make sure that I have those measurements right. After all that drawing I did, oh, just have to do it all over again. Okay, so the point of her upper lip, sort of that indent in the middle of her philtrum, it's right there. I have that measurement right. I think what I don't have right is the tip of her nose. Gotta get a little more accurate with this right there. So I need the tip of her nose to come down quite a bit more. So that's what's not helping it read right. So I am going to come down to there. I'm going to knock off that highlight completely. Okay. I just wiped out the nose and already it looks a lot better. Again, getting a little bit of purple and the alizarin permanent there on the brush. And then I can come in with a new highlight. It's obviously lower than it was before. Okay, that's feeling a lot better now. And this relationship looks about right. Okay, so that little adjustment helped. I make a lot of those type of adjustments throughout a painting till I'm sort of starting to capture the expression, the likeness, the proportions. Just takes a while to get there because it's just so much subtlety and it's really hard to get, you don't get it the first time and you just really have to go back and keep on making those adjustments until it starts to feel right. Just almost coming in black right up against that eye there. There we go. Got to be a little bit brave with that, getting it to get it close enough and dark enough. Okay, can start to do a little bit of squinting to see where things are. Don't forget my yellow. Red. Okay, so, and I have her shoulder too far out or something. Just doesn't feel right. It does look like it's in the right place, but something about it is maybe I don't have the hair right or I come in too far over here. Okay, that does feel a little bit better. But if I look at the shoulders here, not really, something's not quite sitting right. Let's get a little bit of pure red right here. I do not quite getting that fall off of her lower lip right yet. Okay, starting to get there. So how you guys doing out there? You having a good time? So just so you guys know, I've been trying to figure out ways to monetize some of the work that I'm doing. Been sort of working pretty hard at this portraiture stuff, really trying to keep it personal, painting just what I want to paint. But at some point I want to maybe sell prints or something of this work, especially as it improves. There's all kinds of sales channels out there. I can sell through my Instagram account. I can open an account on Etsy. I can um, do things through a local giclée printer that I've done one print um, um, from recently that I've used. It's Archival Arts. I've used them in the past to do some work, and not one of those artists that like, oh, my art is too good to mass produce. It would hurt the quality, my reputation. No, I can just make some reproductions. So, especially if they look good enough and allow people to enjoy it, that so they don't have to, pay the full price of an original. They can also enjoy it by having a fairly low cost reproduction. So I've been looking at sites. Recently I've looked at Printful, which would allow me to kind of moderately sized poster version of my work for $10 to $20. Um, Maybe a little bit less. I can, with markup and shipping, I could sell that for maybe $20 to $30, and that, I think that starts to be reasonable for people, that they could think about, like, oh, I really like that piece you did. Do you have a print or something that I can get? And if I can say, hey, with shipping that will cost $25, then that's more likely to entice people than saying, well, you can buy it, but it's going to be $400 or $500. So, um, so maybe monetizing some of this, maybe, if possible. If it doesn't take all my time trying to promote it, then that will be interesting. If I have to pull time away from painting, doing more paintings, to figure out how to sell the prints of the paintings that I'm doing, then that isn't a very good plan. But I've been trying to at least post on Instagram some of the information, some of the thinking, trying to get some feedback from my followers, just to try to figure out what would work in the audience that I have, or maybe I'll have to find new markets that are more into looking for ways to decorate their houses, their apartments, their wall space. Most of the people that follow me on Instagram are art students or young artists. I can tell that from my demographics, and they're around the world. A lot are in Europe and the Middle East, but really from all over the world. There's some in Central America, Australia. I'm not sure I have that many followers in Africa, but I could be wrong about that. There may be some in like Tanzania or something like that. I think someone said they were from South Africa that was following me. Jamie Hunter. Oh, hi, I'm the father. Jamie Hunter. I don't know if that means that you're Jamie's father, or Jamie is the father's name, and the account's open in the father's name, and then the young woman I'm painting has a different name. I'm not sure, but you can let me know. And okay, so it's going to take a little work to get the subtlety of this jawline, and that's a real important part of getting the feeling of this. And just to let you know how important it is, there's the cheek, the shadows kind of into the cheek. Then there's the jawline, which the cheek is would normally be overlapping that a little bit. What a lot of artists do is exaggerate the hollow of the cheek. It really helps give a greater sense of form, even if you don't really see it that strongly. And then you have the chin that sits in front of that. I need to make that redder. But that line really helps describe, if it's done right, and how hard and soft that edge is, really helps to describe all those forms. So at first glance, it does look just like a straight line or a curve that's just all together, but if you really think about it as that contour holds a lot of information, then you can make sure that you're putting in the right amount of churn and care into that to really help describe all those forms that are there. I'm missing some of the shadows here. I think I got a little bit too much white in the paint mixture on my brush, but there's a shadow on that upper lip here, which means the light is not able to get quite to that spot there. There's the contour of the lips are blocking it a little bit, and I also need to get that in to get the lips to read correctly. Just going to come in with a little bit of lighter paint there. Carve that. Okay, so this is where I have to start to get a little bit more accurate with the values. Let me just, I can look on the live screen. Let me make sure that the, okay, good, my screen isn't frozen. I'm blocking, I'm blocking the thing that I'm trying to see. But I have two monitors here, and the color is really bad in one of them, so when I look over it, everything looks so purple. And, okay. So all I'm doing is I'm comparing the color in the photo here to the color in my painting in the same monitor, so I can kind of see if I'm close. And then I can also compare it to the painting itself, which is over here. Sort of three things. You guys see three things. I see three things. The third thing I see that I'm looking at is this tiny thing right in here. And that's all looking like it's all pretty close to the same family. Okay, so I have all the elements down now. I can continue to work on the face. Okay, let me see. Jamie McKenna. My name is Jamie, haha, that's my dad. But this is amazing, so cool watching the process. Okay, so the dad is Jamie Hunter, the daughter is Jamie McKenna, if I have that right, and you're both watching, and you're both very excited, and I'm very excited too. This is great. And I also let see if I can remember her name. Nayla, is that right? No. Naylin Schnell, that I was also doing this painting. And so I don't know if she would be, or he or she would be interested in watching, but could be one big happy family here watching the photographer, the painter, the model, the dad. Okay, just gonna keep on adjusting things as I go along. At some point, there's this sort of mysterious point in a painting. If I keep on revising and making shapes more accurate and the colors and the value, that there's this point where everything starts to gel. It's like this little bit of magic moment where all of a sudden it starts to feel like the thing that I'm painting, that things start to happen. Yeah. And angles and things start to match up. Okay. I am going to, and what's helpful now is now that a lot of the drawing and the values are in, then it makes it much easier for me to see where um, things are slightly off, and I can go very quickly and start to revise them. Just the little things like where this highlight starts a little bit further over on her nose, and just getting that in the right place starts to make it feel right. Um, just getting a little bit more white in her eye there. It almost doesn't matter if I have the details exactly right, but if there's a dash of color and value that's in the right place, then that is so much more important than how accurate those little details are. In fact, I think sometimes the more interesting paintings are the ones that the brush strokes don't um, aren't mimicking the details. They're more there to kind of carry the flavor of something, and your brain, or it becomes very visually exciting because the brush strokes are doing one thing, and the form that your brain is seeing it sort of as something else. I see a little strong orange there. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that in and close up this black area a little bit. See if I can get the upper lid is catching a little bit of light here because it's facing right towards the light source. And then the lower lid has that black that's coming up a little bit higher. So I'm just sort of moving these things around a little bit, adjusting them until they start to feel like they're in the right place. They're close, but it's all just a little bit off. And I may look at their relative placement to some other things in the painting and decide that it's off by a little bit one way or another, and go back and adjust it again. Okay, so the top of her um, cheek is catching a little more light, but the under part of her lid also is facing right towards the light, and at the same time catching a little bit of reflected light. Not reflected light, catching a little bit of highlight right there. I'm going to knock that back a little bit. Okay. I am just getting a lot of, where I put these darks down that are very wet, I'm getting a lot of reflection of the light, and I'm wondering if there's a way I can knock some of that back or play with it so I'm not getting, it's not reading as a middle value. Ideally I want it to read as a flat black color or close to it. Sometimes that's a matter of getting the strokes in the right direction so it's not picking up the light. Sometimes I do this other trick, and I don't know how much this will affect the video, but I'll turn my light source away. See how it's all getting darker. But then that's helpful because I'm not getting all the reflection, and sometimes I need that to be able to work, to see where I am. That actually did help. I'm not getting quite so much reflection on the painting itself, so I can see the color relationships a little bit better. But I need just a little bit more light to see where I am. Okay, I think that's better. See if I can get that little bit there. Okay, So I like the feeling of this highlight there, but it's the one side just feels a little bit too sharp. And it sort of goes into orange, like a light orange, before it gets into that side of the nose. And the bottom here, make sure I get a little bit of yellow in there too. Okay. And then this shape up here, I'm going to adjust it so that it's following, but I have the contour of the nose right. It's going to take a few times going back and forth to get that. That's a little bit better. Same with up here. Soften that edge a little bit. And I have a little bit too much contrast here. And that's something that's real common mistake to make, is that you'll see changes of color and value, and then I will, a lot of people do, is paint them with way too much contrast, way too much difference, when there's really just the slightest change that you can barely see, but the tendency is to then make a much stronger statement. And that's fine, except that when you do that all over, then you lose the subtlety of the changes of color and value, and it all starts to fall apart. And so what you want to do is kind of squint down, bring those changes closer together, find those subtleties, and then it all starts to work much better. But it takes a little bit of knowledge of those changes are really much smaller than you might think at first. Gotta bring this edge down just a little bit further. And I have some lights here. It's actually a beautiful purple tint that's coming in right here off their corner of her mouth. The same with this highlight that's wrapping around the top edge of her lip. Sorry that I'm talking so quietly here. And I'm trying to stay close to the microphone on the camera, although it's about a foot behind my head. So I'm not even talking in the right direction. So I hope that you can hear me okay. Let's find the shadow here that's on the edge of the nose. This comes down. There's the nostril there. I'm going to have to get this reflected light on the underside of her nose, which means that I need a little bit of a darker red here to get that. Yep, that was a little bit too much, but I can just knock that back a little bit, restate the black that's there, and I might be a little bit closer. And then this shadow comes in a little bit faster on the edge of the nose there. Okay, we're starting to get there. Just starting, baby steps. And still, this highlight I have to make a little bit stronger, more towards the center. Right here. That's feeling a lot better. And almost have a pure orange that's hitting right here. Okay, and that swings up here. Hi, Angela, and my coworker. She's now joining us. She may have been here already, but she's just saying hi now. So there's about 6 people watching. One is the model, the other is her dad. I have a coworker, so that's and then Melania, I think, and Lisa. So pretty much know everyone that's here. There may be a person or two that I missed. Rachita and Alejandra says awesome. Gives me lots of suns with sunglasses and smiley faces. And we have, if with us still, El Diario de Ser Palin. That's his or her um, channel name. Okay, I need to get serious now. We're in this about an hour and a half now, and I think this is going to go 2.5 hours altogether. Probably that'll scare a few of you off, but that's okay. I have to figure out what's going on with this shoulder here. Something. Don't have the right distance. Oh, yes, I have a measurement off that's here with this shoulder. I have about an inch too much of it. No wonder it felt wrong. Sometimes you have to believe your brain. Your brain is telling you something's wrong. You measure it and it says it's right. And this is what my brain was telling me, that it had to be more like that. It's fine. And the beauty of oil paints, it's so forgiving. And just go back, change that line easily enough. Okay, wow, that feels a lot better. So what does that mean about the other shoulder then? That one is, sorry, my brushes. That one's a little too far over too. I made her more like a linebacker. Sorry about that, Jamie. Giving you Ray Lewis shoulders there. Well, he's not a linebacker, but since I don't really follow football that closely, I don't know that many football players' names. So there you go. Okay, I'm just going to throw in a curl or two right here, just to give myself a little bit of the character of the edges of the hair there, to give me something to work with. And these may end up being part of the finish here. If I like the feel of them, I can also just wipe them out and start again. If I have enough green, pure green there, I can, don't think I have enough of the phthalo emerald, but there's a little bit of a leaf here. I just want to indicate where it is. And see if I can sharpen up some of these flowers here. Like I said, I don't really want this to be like super photorealistic of flowers. I'm not a flower painter. I just want them to be a decorative part of the painting. And so, without getting too crazy, I can just get some of the larger shapes working, and then really leave the focus on the face, and that's what's going to carry the painting, not the flowers, hopefully. Okay, gotta get some of that orange back in the cheek there. That's red. Get that red back in. There's a little bit of shadow on the face, and that is kind of reddish shadow next to the black of the hair. So even though there's two darks, and it's hard really to separate it, and then there's even a little bit of highlight in the hair there, making it a little bit grayer, so they're even closer in value. I have to make sure that those color differences are strong enough that you can read where things are. And I don't mind making the hair much more, just leaving it very black, making it much more graphic shape than that, in a way that can be a lot more interesting than trying to paint every curl in the hair. Okay, let's see. So, got some pure reds coming into this here. And I can adjust the flower shape a little bit, over trying to overcome the black. And that black is dried a little bit, because I painted it about an hour ago, so that's good that I came in and blocked a lot of that in, so it's a little easier coming in with some of those the reds now, so that it doesn't mix so much with. It is mixing, but not quite as much as if it were still very wet, and still want it to be a little bit wet, so I can modulate the edges a little bit back and forth. So let's see if I can get some very high key orange and red there, which is requiring getting a lot of yellow into the paint. Because from experience, I know that if I just try to lighten that quinacridone red, which is a very cool red, with white, it's going to get almost violet. And so I really need to come in with some yellows to lighten that color, to get it to be intense enough and warm enough to read correctly. And then I can come in with some pure quinacridone red in some spots to get some of those petal shadow shapes going. And then in the end, I can come in with the alizarin crimson. Let me see if I can get that little bit of purple and alizarin permanent. I keep on saying alizarin crimson, but it's alizarin permanent, to get those sort of darker shadow shapes here. Okay, so that's helping. That's helping give a little bit of dimension to the painting. If I do that, something similar to all the roses, then that's going to help. And I can come in kind of thickly over just a touch of white in that with all that yellow. Get that one petal over here. And just those little touches there, it's already giving it a lot more dimension. Just sort of squinting down so I can sort of see the overall shape and gesture of those flowers. Okay, so I don't want to stray too far from the face, because that's really my goal here, is to get the face working for tonight. And soften some of these transitions in the lips. Really want to get the fullness there to read properly. So a little bit of the upper lip here, that upper inner form is catching a little bit of light there. Okay, and then this bends down a little bit more. Okay. Still have to keep on adjusting this. keep that the detail there, the accents of the separation of her lips. Okay, got a little hot and humid tonight. I have a window open and it's starting to really get kind of sweltery. I may have to close that at some point and let the air conditioning take over. Okay. So, oh, I lost some. I wasn't paying attention. I lost some of my comments here. Um, Richita Mohan says this is awesome. Thank you. Angela looks good. Sharon Elizabeth, thanks for sharing your process with us. And that was the last comment. I don't know how long ago that was. Hopefully my screen isn't frozen. I have to keep on checking. That looks like it's still doing its thing. Okay. Just coming in, softening up some of these transitions, playing with their shapes so that they're helping describe these forms that are here in her face. She's got a lot of reflective light up here on this cheek. Have to really pay attention to where it's catching the most light, and that's going to help tell us where these forms are facing. There's a little bit of there's both the lit area of the cheek that's facing directly towards the light and the highlight from the light, both kind of working together there. So I just have to keep on playing back and forth with whites and yellows up there, so until it starts to read like light hitting on that form. And I have to make sure that I'm getting something like the Rembrandt triangle here. If anyone has heard of Rembrandt, if anyone is familiar with the way Rembrandt tended to light his subjects, he would have the light coming from an angle from one side, usually from a window that was covered with some sort of cloth that allowed the light to come in through kind of very softened light. But what that would do is create this sort of reddish, what's called a Rembrandt triangle. In her case, just the shape of her face, it's not really making a triangle, but it would be the shadow of the nose and the cast shadow of the nose, the core shadow of the cheek, and the shadow from underneath the eye would create this triangular shape. And so she has something close to that. Let's see if I can turn this shape off here. Oop, what did I just do? Okay, there. I was getting the center marker for, yep, it's, turn it off. Okay, was landing on her cheek. It was kind of distracting me. But I need some of these changes in color and value here that are helping describe the shape of the cheek there, which is kind of important here. And then I also want to accentuate this shadow, making sure I go dark enough, and capturing how soft and sharp it is in different places. Red, and a little bit of a darker red here. And then this is very softly going to that shadow on that upper lip. So I think we're starting to get that turn in the form there. bit um, too wide there. Really have this very small, almost a square bit of light that's right here on the side of her mouth. And then this is very soft on this edge, on the left side of that. So I'm just, again, looking back and forth between what's happening in the photo, what I'm looking at on the monitor, and what I've done in the painting, comparing that. Because right now I'm just trying to get some of these subtle changes in the right place, some of the marks in the right place, so it does feel like the same character of her expression that's in the photo, that I'm getting that in the painting. And just then also really trying to capture how beautiful the light is on her face. Just really, it's really so rich and lovely that I want to make sure that I'm giving it the same amount um, of color, the same amount of color and accuracy, so that it really kind of reads very similar. Just, okay, need to go much redder and warmer on the tip of her nose. And then I'm missing a little bit of the dark shape that's coming right there. That's where it can be a little more accurate. Then she has the shadow coming in, describing the shape of her nose right there. And that's where I have to really pay attention to those smaller forms in the nose to get them to read properly. Because each one of those smaller forms are just very delicate little features, and if they're off by a lot, it will just feel so wrong. So have to just be very careful there to get them just in the right place. And so that's sort of what ends up, and at times, what's the difference between a really well-crafted, beautiful painting and something that just doesn't ever feel right, is just knowing how accurate you have to be with certain parts of the anatomy. Okay. Okay, so I have about 45 minutes here. I am going to end this at 11:30. That'll be 2.5 hours in total. But I'm fairly confident that I can get far enough along in this that you guys will see something that's close to finished. Okay, really want to nail the lips here, and I need to get that very thin shadow that's at the bottom. Okay, not, I took a couple hacks at it and I didn't get it quite right. So just have to be a little more patient to get this. Okay, and then get that shadow, and then really getting the chin right up against that. And so part of the problem here is I didn't have the chin light enough, so I wasn't really seeing the shadow, the mark that I was making for the shadow, very easily. That's a little bit better. And then I have to make their chin a little bit deeper. Get some of the reds in there that are there. That's better. Already feels better. Okay, and then I have the reflected light that's right at the bottom of this chin. I can tell that I went way too light there. Um, Really, this has to be like a half a step lighter in value. And this comes around and then falls there. Okay. And need to adjust that flange, her nostril there. The shape of the nostril and the shape of the flange of the nostril has to be out just a little bit further, and has the light accent that follows it around. And then we have these little bits of highlight that helps describe those shapes too. Okay, I can get a little bit of detail by using just the corner of this brush. Um, Not quite as well as a detailed brush, but good enough for how I'm painting tonight. And then I can get a whole line of fairly narrow highlight there with just the flat, with the edge, both the tip and the edge I'm using to get different marks. Really get this really strong red right here. Has a touch of white and yellow, but it's quite rich right here on the tip of the nose. And it gets a little bit lighter right up here. And then this whole shape comes up. And then on the side, it's not even really so much a value change as it is a color change to a little bit more orange, yellow. So I can exaggerate that just a touch, get that change of color to help describe the change in direction of the form. See if I have this, and then I lost the edge of the shadow here. Comes in a little bit further into the side of the nose. Okay, that's starting to read. It's taking a while to get there, but it's just starting slowly. A little more white to open up this light area of the cheek a little bit. Get this underneath the eyelid here, lower eyelid, catching a little bit of light. There's a bit of an accent from the crease in the eyelid there. It's very subtle. You can just kind of put it in and then rub it back a little bit. Don't have to be perfect coming in, but you can use the brush to just make little subtle adjustments. Okay, and I have a very dark reddish color that's on the edge of the shadow on the cheek. And that'll help give a sense of that transition as the form is turning. I just pay attention to that color change there. That's going to give us the speed of the turn. Just give us a little more tools to describe that if I pay attention to those color shifts. Okay, starting slowly, we're getting there. missing, there's a little bit of highlight here on the upper lip, just inside of that philtrum. It's just catching a little bit of light. It's tempting to go white, but it's not. It's not that bright a color or value. And then we have a bit of red. That's the part of the philtrum, the edge of it, the groove that's facing away from the light. And then it just gets a little bit darker as it goes into this little well shape here. And then along the outer edge is these lights that are catching the light. I have to pay attention to those small character of the small forms there, because they are doing a lot of work describing the form. The edge of that nostrils coming down and wrapping under. And if that's the case, then there must be a change of color or value on the upper lip right there. And there is. And that's helping us find the edges of the nose. And I want this shadow to come down right a little bit lower here. Yep. We're starting to get it. We're starting to get a sense of where those forms are. Got to adjust the shape of that lip a little bit. Had it coming up just a tad too high. Okay, the same with this side. A little bit tad too high. Now, this may seem a little bit boring, I guess, as an observer, even as me painting it, but I know this is what it takes to get this where it needs to be. It's just these tedious little subtle adjustments. This stuff doesn't happen all by itself. It really does take a fair amount of concerted effort to make these adjustments until the thing starts to read correctly. And as I get to these I want to say reflected light, I know it's my brain. These highlights on the cheek, I can come in with thicker and thicker paint, because it does, for whatever reason, that thick paint sitting on top of the surface, and especially if it's changing color and value, it really does help it look like it's the light that paint sitting on the surface of the painting feels like it is the light reflecting off the surface of the person. Got a whole bunch of red paint right out in my hand. I'm gonna have a little bit of cleanup to do before I go to bed. I want to just come in with my little detail brush, not so little detail brush actually, but just come in with a little bit lighter white and change the shape of that eye a little bit. And then there's this interesting little reflected light right here that breaks the shape of the iris. So it's just telling us there's a little bit of light coming from this other direction, which I can just put in the other eye right there, too. Okay, just adjusting some of the little shapes in here, make sure that it's reading the same as in the photo. Even just like this little bit of dark or red here is helping us tell where the top of the nose is and where that starts to turn down. before it starts picking up a little bit more orange and light, and then this starts catching the light again up here. Just going to restate the red that's there and come in with the lighter orange against it. Just really working back and forth until it does feel like, what I want is work back and forth until it's no longer reading as a little change of color here and there on a flat surface. It's really starting to read like, oh, that's the side of the cheek that's falling away from the light, and here's the highlight that's reflected light that's coming in that's describing the edge here. So I really start to feel that those forms and what direction different parts of the face are pointing. So then it does really start to have a strong sense of dimension to it. And remember, I said there's a lot of artists do exaggerate that hollow in the cheek. Well, that's right here. It's right here, and I am going to exaggerate that just a little bit so that it's just giving the viewer a little more clues than are kind of obvious to the shape of the form there. And just that's a little bit of a cheat, but it really does do the job quite well. And then I'm going to exaggerate that orange yellow color that's coming in right there. So that's helping. And I want to just make that a little bit thinner. Great. That's doing a lot of work there for me. So all of a sudden this is starting to feel so much more dimensional, just those little clues. And especially as if I can shape these highlights so that they follow the top of the cheek up. It's there in the photo, it's just really subtle. Almost wouldn't notice it. But that, again, is doing a lot of work to help describe that form. And I knock down that thicker paint, but then I do want to come in and restate it. Great. And there's a little bit, there's the upper eyelid has sort of a darkish color. Some of it's because it's facing away from the light, and it catches a little bit of red in it too. So I want to catch that. But then there's also a little bit of a cast shadow, like the light is coming from below and is casting a shadow on the form above that eyelid. And then interestingly, there's also a highlight here, very subtle, that tells us that this whole form is curving, and this is the spot that's catching the most light. And again, kind of grayish color for the eyebrow up here. And then it does get some dark accents, but it has a bit of hair that kind of purpley in character that go right over it. And that really does help getting those little bit of purple or bluish highlights in that hair right here. I said I was going to simplify most of the hair by letting it go just black, but just getting a little bit of these highlights in here do help um, give a greater sense of dimension. And I'm going to bring this flower down lower. Okay, this is, it's starting to get a little bit of character here, which is good. It's taking a while to get there, but just getting some of those subtleties in. It's taking a while, but a little light orange that's coming in right here. Kind of had it in the wrong spot before, so I'm adjusting that. And I'm straightening out that shadow shape a little bit. I had a little bit too much, um, too strong a bend into that shape. And then see if I can find that in-between value between the orange in her cheek and the black of the shadow, just to give that, make that a little bit softer. That was too dark there, so let's try it again. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And then kind of a purpley red here, this upper cheek, as it turns away from the light. And then here, I'm going to do that same thing I did on the other side, but kind of different, in a different way, is finding that the underside of her cheek coming in a little bit. It's actually catching more of the fullness of a cheek, so I want to kind of create that form that's pointing away a little bit. And straight, make this a little more vertical here, the edge of that shadow. It's going kind of gray. Okay. And I want to make sure that I get that chin line, that there's some clues, enough clues to where it is, so that it doesn't feel like her face sort of just becomes her hair. Okay. I think that's starting to be good. There's a little bit of stiffness to her face still. Um, Probably places where the drawing is off a little bit. It's making it kind of feel a bit stiff. So all that's partially some adjustment that will make it feel right. Just little things like there's a little more curve to the outer edge of that nose. When I did something like straighten that out or pulled it in too far, then it just gives a different feeling, you know? Or I'm not light enough here, so you're not really reading the change in a little bit of the upper edge of that cheek there. And then there's just the slightest orange change here, which is telling you where that change of direction is in the side of her nose. Okay, you guys are very quiet out there, but that's fine. Um, That's better. Just keep on making those tiny little adjustments. Even little things like I'm going to make the white of the eye just a little bit bigger here. It's just a small amount. It's like a half a millimeter or something, but it does make a difference. There's a little bit of blue in it. Yeah, there's a little bit of red in it towards the bottom. Almost an orange or a yellow. Let's see. If I get that right, then you really will start to feel the glassiness of the eye. Yep, that's feeling better. And then you don't really see, usually the tear duct kind of goes red, but there's a lot of light reflecting on it, so you can't really see the color of it that well. So I'm not going to put it in just because I rather have it look a little more naturalistic, whatever is really happening there. However, on the other side, even though almost completely in shadow, is the tear duct. And I want to get, it's very yellow, the white of her eyes on the other side. A lot of yellow in that, and it's really a lot lighter than what I painted it. And then close to white, right along the edge of the iris. Okay. I'm still missing the mark here. Yeah. And then the accent of her eyelid is actually a lot higher there. I mean the accent, the crease. And just get a little bit of touch of reflected light here, or highlight something that's catching the light there. Okay, and not really getting the squareness of her chin yet. There, that's starting to feel better. Okay. I'm going to sharpen up that highlight in her eye and the shape of her pupil there. If I thought I could get it, there's just where that black of the iris shifts into the white of the eye. There's just a hint of red there. If I can get that, will really feel like something. And then there's these sort of weird yellow highlight accents too in the white of the eye. When I say weird, unusual to see that color. And then just popping that little second reflected light there. Okay, and going to adjust the white of her eye here. It's just a little bit bigger and then curves a little more strongly. I know I just mispainted it a little, but I can come back in and carve back the the, the upper edge of her, I can't even talk, upper edge of her eyelid there. It's very dark, kind of red. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's getting there. And then this is, again, the form is changing direction right there, so I just want to get a little bit of change of value just in that spot, and it's really much redder than I have it. Same here, this catching a little bit of light right on this form right here. There's a smaller form that folds down, and with that there's a little bit of reddish orange on the other side, underside of that form, just helping us understand it. There we go. Okay, I'm going to leave some of that for now before it starts to feel overworked. But I do want to make sure that I'm following, getting the character of this curve that comes down here. This is partly what helps add to the softness of her face, is getting the shape of that form right. Curves here, then comes back the other way. And then this comes down and then curves around the other way. Okay, and we've got a little bit of these bluish, I guess. I don't even know what color they are. They're just sort of neutral light that's being caught up here. And then we got bits of strands of hair that's also coming down. It's very subtle, but I'm just going to exaggerate it a little bit. Knock it back. Okay, that's looking pretty good without getting crazy in the details and the weeds. I'm going to give her a little bit, suggesting a little more highlight there. I need to come in a little bit lighter in that upper lip just so I can see better the separation. And there's a little bit of light on the upper edge of her lip there that's coming around, and there's a little bit of highlight here. That highlight that I was talking about it as being a square before. I'm just coming back and restating it a little. I'm going to throw in a little bit of blue here. It's a place in the face where I can almost get a fair amount of blue and it won't look wrong. Same here, kind of purpley gray along the edge of that light here. All right, so this is pretty close. I have got about 10 minutes left, so what I'm going to try to do here is just pick apart anything that's really feels far off. Try to bring it, get it a lot closer to where it needs to be, and then I will finish it tonight or tomorrow offline. But I want to thank you guys while I'm, got about 10 minutes left. I want to thank you guys while I'm thinking of it for tuning in. Also to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And to get notifications, it's really a two-step process. You have to subscribe, and then you also have to click on the bell icon, and that lets YouTube know that you're interested in getting either email or push notifications on your phone to let you know that I'm either posted a new video or that I'm starting a live video. I can fix her underarm there. Don't really have the black edge here. I'm going to go put that in. Black or very dark. And then again have the red edge. A lot of times you can find color where there's a transition of light from shadow into light. That's sometimes you get sort of these accent colors that you can see. Okay, that's helping it feel real. Gotta get this flower shape corrected here. Just gonna come in almost with like this pure red, just kind of thickly describe it. And then it does have black violet shadow shape in here. Just going to really make it quite punchy. And do a similar thing in a couple of these flowers just to really get them to pop. Needed that. And missing completely this flower out here. See if we can get that to read. Just see if I can get it with like 2 or 3 brush strokes. Okay, and then I'm just going to restate some of those shadow marks, and that's all it really needed. Okay, so about 5 minutes, see if I can knock down some of the transitions here that are maybe distracting a little bit, try to simplify some of these. Try to make them, use a large brush to kind of unify them a little bit. Okay, I said I wasn't going to go pure white there, but just letting a little white just sit on the surface just to help it read a little bit better. Okay, and just going to see if I can flatten out some of the blacks in here. Okay, now just to add interest, I'm going to keep on going here for about 5 more minutes. But for the background, I painted it rather thinly, but it would add a lot of interest if I can then carve back in with some much thicker paint. Just making some really bold marks here will add a lot of interest, especially with if I can get some of the negative shapes in her hair. It's kind of a contradiction. It's like these things that you can see through her hair, but I'm painting as something on top. And it's those kind of delicious little ironies that that make it much more visually interesting. Let's see if I lost my green, that I can put these green leaves back into. Get some of the black accents back in here. Okay, and what I'm missing is just a couple items of interest that I'm just so close here. I don't know how much detail I really have to put in, as long as I get the correct shapes and a sense of form turning along the edges here. But I just want to make sure that I get the edge of her collar and her hoop earrings, and that's really going to really give us a whole lot of interest if I get these right. Don't want to overdo it, just just enough so you can tell what they are. Just got a glint of the metal there with this a touch of paint. Yep. And then just the edge of her. Oops. Oh, I got it. And then just find the bottom edge there. Okay. And that just really comes down a lot lower. And then I get this color right. Oh, that's much redder. Too red, but that's okay. And then she has a little bit of a accent that follows the underside of that, and then it then goes into red right here. Okay. And then it just feels like it just needs a little bit of adjustment in the shoulders, and I kind of feel like that's all that it really needs. So let's see if I can use that thicker paint and come in just a lot of white and get some of that edge to be the right shape. So this little point here comes down. I have that about right. Yep, that's starting to feel better. Got this bright white in here. Have this shoulder, and then I think it's coming down closer to like that. Then I want to get some of that yellow and orange that follows that edge, and then it goes much lighter. Pretty close. Get a lot of yellow in there. Orange. Okay. I think that's really close. Want to sharpen that highlight that's in the eye. Yep, that felt like it. And the same with the other eye. Usually you want to make one of the highlights be a little bit stand out more than the other. These are pretty close in size. Now that I did that, it just feels like the tip of the nose just really needs to sing there. And just make it, instead of just being round, just pull it out to the side a little bit. And a touch higher. I think I'm really close here. I might, once I've gotten it to where I want it to be, I think that's really the last thing that needs to be done on this painting, because it does need, it feels like it needs the freshness that it has. I want to just correct the shape of the nostril there. Just bring it, it just comes up just a tad higher. Okay, correct it, bring it back down a little. And more towards the center. Great. And then restate that highlight that's underneath it. And I think that's going to be a finished painting. I should sign it and post it so I don't paint on it anymore. that, but maybe I'll sign it right here. Yeah. And then I'm going to rub that one out. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining me. Hope you enjoyed this process. Jamie Hunter, Jamie McKenna, thank you very much. Thank you for joining, and Jamie, thank you very much for this beautiful photo. If if you want, please come back again following weeks. I try to do this every Tuesday night and make a thing of it. So any Tuesday night you tune in around this time, I should be doing this. And I just saying one more thing I want to change before I go. Just want to add a little bit more to that chin. Oh, and I've ruined it. No, no, it's fine. Okay, and okay, that's it. Good night, everybody, and thank you.